Welcome one, welcome all to Vision Podcast. This podcast focuses on athletes past, present and future. I'm your host Jordan McKenna and I help athletes tell their stories. Everyone has their sights set on something. I know everyone has a vision, and my question is, what's yours? Hello and welcome to episode 142 of Vision Podcast. This week's episode features a recreational runner who has spent the last 10 years of his life in the country known as China. China has a population of over 1.5 billion people. It is the most populated country in the world. It is soon to be home to the Winter Olympics in its capital, Beijing. It has hosted a Summer Olympics in Beijing. As well as that, we also learn from Rob Burton, who I speak to in this episode, about the Asian Games, which will be taking place in China very shortly. Rob speaks about the running and athletic culture in China, as well as what it takes for somebody to make the move and make China their home. He loves the country that he is now in, respects the country that he is now in, and will continue to achieve great things whilst in this country. Here is my chat with Rob Burton from China. Hello, I'm joined by Rob Burton, who is over in China. He's been there for 10 years. Not quite a Chinese citizen yet, but I'm willing to claim him as one. He's doing great things over there. And we're going to talk about running. Now, Rob, can you talk to me, firstly, about your journey over to China? How did it come across?
Well, I've been working in British universities for quite a long time. And because I think of the government cutbacks with higher education, they were making people redundant. And they tried to make me redundant and messed it up. And then about 2 years later, I just got totally fed up with the whole situation. And the next time they did redundancies at the university I was working at, I put my hand up. And because I was old, I was in my late 50s then. And I'd always thought about coming to China to teach when, I'd seen adverts in the newspapers, and I thought, I was divorced, I was single, so why not have an adventure? And here I am 10 years later.
Yeah, of course. And I'm guessing that you're loving it, minus the fact that you did have to go through the old COVID, but that's what we don't like to focus on.
No, that's fine. Yeah, it's great. I'm having a great time.
Let's talk about running in general. Do you mind telling me about your running career and, what running means to you?
Well, I guess I started running at school, like most of us, in Britain, in the southwest of England where I lived. In the winter, we played rugby and did cross-country running. And so that's where I guess I started running. And I played rugby after school as well. So, in adult teams. So being a rugby player, you get you run. And I guess that's sort of stayed with me off and on all my life. I'm in my sort of, mid 60s now. And, but, I've continued to run. I'm not saying I'm an athlete of any sort, but, I continued to run all my life. Sometimes I haven't run for 6 months, but then I get the itch again and I start again.
Well, running is one of those things. Yeah, running is one of those things that just sticks with us. As you said, it's one of those things that if you're having a bad day, you can kind of pick yourself up and go out and explore your local area. Or if you choose to do a marathon and you're that serious about that, it's something you can do.
Yeah, it is one of those things you can pick up, drop, and then remind yourself that you haven't run for a while, or the stomach starts to remind you, which it's doing right at this moment. But as I said, I haven't run for a while, and I've got this long holiday, so I'll probably start getting out there again.
So can you talk to me about what China's like in regards to its athletics and, of course, its running culture? A big population. So yeah, how did they go about exploring different ways to, run and explore the area?
Well, yeah, it's really amazing because they start kids running at school. So when you go past the schools, you'll see them running around. Every school has a running track or games field, and you'll see them out in their classes running around. Uh, the little kids all the way up through high school, they'll be running. At university, every student has to run 60 kilometers a semester, and they all have to have an app on their phone. So, they are, and they do have, even university students have PE lessons, but they do have an app and they do have to fulfill 60 kilometers a semester with their running. So, they start running at an early age. Even little kids in our community, because we all live in communities, you'll see them running with their parents. You'll see them skipping. They call it jumping, but skipping. So some parents make their kids do 1,000 skips every evening before they go to bed, and they stand there counting them, 1, 2, 3. So there's a huge, China is very health conscious in terms of physical activity. You'll see grandpa, grandma out shuffling along, it's still a run, or they're dancing on street corners, or the aunties are out dancing at night in groups. So there's a lot of focus on physical activity in China as a way of keeping healthy.
In regards to being healthy as well, do you think it's a way of getting them involved to represent their country at a national level, or is that something that's just not out of not what they want?
I think that's at a general level of keeping the population healthy. And as I mentioned, I can look out of my window and I can see the running track along the side of the road. Nearly in the big cities, the rural areas are different, but the big cities like I live in, they're what they call greenways, and nearly every road has a running track. There's the pavement, there's the road, the pavement, and a running track. And they're marked out in kilometers as well. And you'll see people out running. You'll see people out running early morning, because Chinese people tend to get up earlier than we do. They'll get up at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock as a matter of course, and at night. And of course, in the summer, when it's here in this part of the world, in the summer gets really, really hot, a bit like Australia. I went out for a run. I think the last run I did was when it was really, really hot. I almost died.
No, that's okay. You haven't acclimatized yet.
But I think in terms of moving from a school run or a university run, that's how they move into professional or amateur athletics, through their schools and their universities.
So is it something that you believe other countries should adapt?
Well, I think the focus in China, and here I'm sort of on shaky ground, and the thing about China, I guess, is that people are very nationalistic. They have a huge pride in their country, so that would probably drive it more than the notion of being a professional. And you might be in the West or America, you're talking about being a professional athlete and earning money from it. And I don't think that's the case in China. I think money is probably secondary, but I'm sort of guessing at that.
No, that's okay. Now, before we go, I do have to ask, can you introduce your cat? Because it seems like the cat's got a lot to say.
Well, the cat is a rescued cat. We've only had it about 4 days, and we found it on our community. And it's still I think it's still hunting food, so I think it's still in street mode.
Of course.
That's why it's meowing a lot. But and I'm walking around, sort of looking for stuff to eat. We've also got a dog here that I brought with me from the UK.
Well, your cat there who's looking for its food is much like a runner looking for the kilometers.
Yeah. So this one is. So we found her in the community, lost. So we picked her up, took her to the vet, and fed him.
Well, it's amazing that you've got that sort of a way about you that you're able to help. Is that what we have in China there? Is it a very helping community?
Not for animals, unfortunately. Pets are still quite a new phenomenon in China. And you know, I don't want to badmouth the country, but you know, they don't treat animals in the same way as we do in the West, like, oh, they're part of the family.
Yeah. No, that's understandable. Well, I do have to ask, how long did it take for you to, obviously being in the UK, moving over to this brand new land, how long did it take for you to adapt?
Well, not long really, because I've sort of travelled all my life. I wasn't always, I wasn't always an academic. I left a very poor school in England with poor exams and went straight into a factory to do an apprenticeship, and an engineering apprenticeship. So I learned I became a skilled machinist. And as soon as I could, as soon as the apprenticeship had finished, which then was 5 years, I emigrated. And I could have been an Australian, I could have been your neighbour, but I had a choice between Australia, Queensland, and South Africa. And oddly enough, I chose South Africa. But the problem was, it was in the 1970s, and no one told me about apartheid.
Oh, okay.
They sort of told me that Queensland was quite a right-wing state in Australia in the 70s, but they didn't quite tell me the difference between Queensland and South Africa. So getting back to your question, it was I lived in Holland and worked in Holland as well, so I'm sort of quite used to. I'm a sort of the guy where wherever I hang my hat, that's my home. So I was pretty comfortable, and I'm a sociologist as well. My degree and PhD is sociology, so I sort of understand, how societies work.
So you'd say that you're a people person, in a sense. Is that correct?
Yeah, to be a sociologist, you've got to be one of those guys who sits in a coffee shop and watches everybody else. You don't want to listen to your friends. You sit there looking at what everybody else is doing. That's the definition of a street sociologist. Is you watch a people watcher.
Well, speaking of watching, and we'll go back to China. What's it like in that higher level watching the athletes, and what's the competition like for athletes?
I mean, I really don't have any idea, because I haven't been to any athletic competitions. What I can tell you is, with the buzz in Hangzhou, which is where the Asian Games are going to be later this year, there's a huge buzz. There's a huge investment in the facilities, in the venues, in the city itself. The whole place is getting a do-over, because it's a massive event for China. Yeah, they've got the Olympics next week, isn't it, or a couple of weeks?
Yes, the Winter Olympics they've got in a couple of weeks. Yes. Yeah,
so they got the Beijing Olympics, then we've got the Asian Games. So, the focus on athletics in China is huge. They are really into it.
Of course.
But I don't know about, the competition between athletes, but I know that, the Chinese people are really into their athletics. I've been proofreading the marketing magazine for the Asian Games. So over the past year, I think we've done about 5 or 6 issues, and they've been detailing everything that they've been doing, to get these games on track, to be the best. They want it to be, the best games ever.
You were speaking about like how you haven't seen the sport before, you haven't had these sort of competitions allows you to go out and watch these sorts of sports, and it gets people excited and pretty much builds a new generation. But I'm gathering with what you said at the start of this interview, kids already in China have that built into them. So it's kind of an interesting concept, isn't it?
And that the organizations that are involved, the Olympic organizations, the Asian Games, they put a massive effort into getting out into the communities. There are lots of events that take place for local people. That they get people, they're getting people involved from every age group and every area, not just the cities, but out into the rural areas all across the country. So there's a huge, there's a huge take up of this focus on the athletic events and getting people interested. And just this year, I don't know if you know, but this year in the Asian Games, breakdancing is now involved in the Asian Games, and esports. There's going to be esports competitions and breakdancing in a direct attempt to get young people involved and interested in the games.
Well, we know that Paris 2024 is going to be hosting breakdancing, which is good. So I'm guessing that's why they've chosen that. But esports, I've always been for the fact, because it's a mental game, and a lot of your aspects behind the Olympics, there's a lot of mental aspects, like everything in life. Mentally, how do you prepare, or how have you overcome issues, say, with running? Like if you've gone out for a run, you've injured yourself all this time where you've had to spend off. How do you overcome the fact that you can't run?
Well, I think that that Facebook page, the running community is a good thing, and you can go on there and you can have a moan, or you can just say something, or you can just look at what other people are doing now, how other people are coping. I'm also a great armchair adventurer, and I read some of the long distance runners. There's a woman called Anne Mcduff, who she ran the length of New Zealand, and then she ran, or did she cycle? Then she cycled through every state. And I've just been reading, just last week I finished a book reading of a British girl who was the first woman to run the coast of England, in Great Britain, run the coast of Great Britain, 5,000 miles. And I mean, she was 20 something, and she'd never run more than a half marathon before, but then one day decided she was going to run around the coast of Britain. And that's because I understand, when they're running the length of New Zealand or running around the coast of Great Britain, they're not, there are times when they walk or stop or, shuffle along, which is sometimes what, I end up doing, even not, if I'm tired, it's just keeping moving, isn't it? It's not about beating your stupid watch. So I think, those are the things that, one of the reasons why I'm feeling like, yes, I've got a lot of time, is that I need to get out and run again. Is, just because I've been reading this book, gives me more enthusiasm and, the kick up the ass that I need, really.
Well, I'll give you a name to look at in regards to books as well. David Goggins. He wrote a book. He's a US Navy SEAL. He's done it all. He actually became an ultra trail runner. And he was one of those shufflers. That's a guy to look up. But there's many people out there, as you said, that Facebook page. Now, that's how I got this interview with you. I found you commented on one of the posts I put up. It also says on your profile you have a YouTube channel. Do you mind explaining the videos that you do and your YouTube?
Oh, my YouTube channels are. I mean, a lot of people are doing. Oh, I went to this wonderful place in China. Oh, this is what happened. My YouTube channel is just random bits of film of what happens to me or what I see in China. There's no thought behind it. I've not got a plan. I'm not aiming to get monetized or anything like that. So I think my last couple of videos was I videoed some Pooh Bear tickets in a shoe shop that we were in, just to put up to challenge some of the myths about China. I'm not a big myth challenger, I'm not one of those hardcore pro China YouTubers, but I will, post things, so I posted one thing about, look, here's Pooh Bear in China, it's not banned, sort of stuff. This is another one of those myths. But another video I did last week was, I live on this new community that's being built, and so there's some houses. Those are like 8 million, 9 million RMB, which is like $1.5 million, and they're horrible. They're horrible. Half of them are underground. It's really strange. But there's a house over here that's in the process of being done up, and the workers were away over New Year and they'd left the doors open, so I just went in and filmed what they were doing. So it's just my videos are very strange. I'm not a shrill. People sometimes say, "Oh, you're a shill for the Communist Party." Some people just don't want to see the truth about China. They just believe all the stuff, like all the stuff about a million deaths, millions and millions of deaths in China, during the first outbreak. I mean, it's just rubbish. It's just rubbish. Because, and I'll tell you why. At the time when we locked down the first time, I had over 300 students, and all of them were in their hometowns because it was the holidays. So I had 300 students all over China. A good proportion of them were in Wuhan. And I had to go on teaching. We were teaching online to all my students. Not one of my 300 students knew anybody who had died or anybody who had the virus, right?
That's amazing.
So there's all those people. None of my wife's family and friends in another city, Changzhou, they didn't know anybody who died or had the virus. None of my friends knew anybody who had the virus. We still don't know anybody who had the virus who died. In all my students, and statistically, with that sample, there should have been, somebody who knew somebody who had died or had the virus. So statistically, based on that sample, and I'm a sociologist. I work in, samples. Based on that sample, I can say I'm pretty confident that the figures of 5,000 dead are real. Last year, last year it was only 2 people died in China.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing to hear, especially from somebody that's experienced it firsthand. Now, I've got
Yeah,
one last question for you in regards to what we've chatted about today. Is what
yeah.
do you believe the future is like for the country of China in regards to not only sport but the way it's perceived? You've spoken about how you'd like to go out and say, like, Winnie the Pooh's actually here. How do you think the modern world will perceive China in the future?
There's been there's been this huge amount of upsurge of anti-Chinese rhetoric, generally led by the Americans for whatever reason. And I had a British friend who got caught up in that. So I had a British friend who was teaching at an international school in Suzhou, which is a city up towards Shanghai. And an international school is where the kids of businessmen and engineers, foreigners, come. You have to have a foreign passport to go to an international school, and they follow a British curriculum.
Okay.
Anyway, as an after school club, he took over from an American guy, Boy Scouts of America, as an after school club. And he and the school got busted by the Public Security Bureau, the police, and he ended up in prison for 2 weeks. Was fined 20,000 RMB, it's about £20,000, it's about £2,000, and was told to leave the country. He wasn't deported, but was told to leave the country, and that was a direct result, because when he said, what's the problem with the Boy Scouts of America, they said it's anti-Chinese, pro-American, propaganda based on militaristic, rules, and they wear a uniform, which are all illegal in China. But the sort of the feeling is it was a reaction against what was happening, because the Huawei thing was happening. There was that woman that was in prison. It was just getting caught up in international politics. And I think the future for China, man, I don't know if you've ever been here, and one of your questions was, why should people come here? It's because, China is the 21st century. I love living in the 21st century in China, because the technology that is embedded into our life is amazing. I'm no Luddite. I love technology. I love the fact when I go to my university, my face gets scanned and the doors open for me. I can't remember the last time I carried cash. You just use your phone all the time now. Your phone's got everything on it. Of course, if your phone dies, you're lost. The trains are like, the slowest trains now go 300 kilometers an hour. The fastest trains are now 600 kilometers an hour, and they're clean and on time. And there are people, there are like air hostesses or walking up and down the train. The stations are great. That if you look at some of the other YouTubers who talk about this, you can go out into China. You're not going to get mugged. You're not going to see drug addicts. You're not going to see homeless people. The place is clean. There's no litter on the floor. There's economic socialism, right? There's economic socialism, which is the political system, but socialism is also about the place where you live. The Chinese government, the Chinese Communist Party, they make sure that where you live is nice. It's a nice place to live. I live in a community. It's landscape. There are gardeners. it's a beautiful place to live. You can see, if you saw it, it's a bit of a misty day today, but I'm sat in a rented apartment, but overlooking the huge river. It's very nice, and my university pays most of my rent.
That's great that you're able to experience such a growing culture, minus, of course, the political side of thing. And, of course, it's great that they're actually bringing things in, such as the Asian Games, that you're able to experience. And, of course, people of the past that lived in the country would have had the Beijing Olympic Games. You now got the Winter Olympics. It's a great time to be Chinese and living in China. I want to thank you for spending your time, Rob, chatting about the country that you now love.
That's fine. Yeah, anytime.
There we had Rob Burton from China, a great spokesman for the country, what it has going on at the moment, and of course, what it looks to do in the future. I was very happy to hear about what it's like for somebody to move, make that move, change their life, and I can gather from what Rob spoke about, it definitely has changed his life, the move, and of course the country itself. A great running culture, a great athletic culture, and the country is even greater with him in it. Thank you once again, Rob, for the chat, and thank you to the listeners for tuning in to yet another episode of Vision Podcast. Join me next week. Who knows who we're going to get. Make sure to check out Vision Podcast on Facebook, Spotify, iTunes, and all other podcast platforms. Always remember, we all have a vision. What's yours?